These guys are core technologies. But what is the point of going for Angular? That is where many people will have some confusions. Then why? Why Angular? First, let me give an answer for this question. Then we'll move on to, guys, Angular is majorly built for single page application architecture, single page PA, single page application architecture. So I'll explain you once installation is done what is single page application architecture. I'll try to explain you guys on a project. Now Angular is a framework. First let me talk about, since it is a framework which has a bunch of predefined plugins and predefined libraries which will help us to develop web application as quickly as possible. In case, listen carefully, if you are building a web page by using HTML and CSS, okay. Hi Tim, good evening. Siva, are you able to watch? How about now? Can you please check now?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Is it live now?
Yes, sir.
Hi guys, good evening. So today's agenda is all about, we are going to talk about what is Angular, overview of Angular, how Angular is helping us to build applications. Angular can also be used in mobile application development as well. So I'm going to explain about the basics of Angular today. I'll also build an application from the scratch. You please try to understand what is the major advantages of Angular, how Angular is helping development companies to build web applications, what are the main features which are there in Angular. This is what you guys have to understand better. Guys, listen carefully. Without Angular, also we can build an applications by using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. By using these core technologies, if you are planning to build a web page, everywhere you have to write a code, and even the application, as long as if the application size increases, the complexity will also increases. When the complexity increases, you should go for advanced techniques like object-oriented principles, which we had discussed in JavaScript, either encapsulation, polymorphism, inheritance, all these kind of concepts that we're supposed to implement to reduce the complexity, to improve the modularity, and to assign the tasks for maintaining an application development. We have to use all these advanced techniques. But instead of writing all these advanced techniques, everything that you have to write from the scratch if you are using core technologies. Whereas coming to the framework is in line with some sort of features like components, and it also has a framework is in line with some features like, if you ask me, component. This Angular has a component feature. I'll explain about what is component. This Angular also has a directive features, directives. Angular also has the forms and form validations. Ready-made validations are there, forms and the form validations. Angular also has a pipes, which is called as filters in the older versions. In the latest version, the filters is called as pipes. And you can also make services. Angular also has services to send a request from client to a server using HTTP. And we also have dependency injection. So while creating a services, we may need to load some dependencies, which is called dependency injection. So these are the main features which are there in Angular bus. By using all these main features, we will be able to build web application as quickly as possible. So let me explain about how component is going to help. So I'll just give one simple example and I'll just move on to the application creation. Guys, every application, if you see any web application, if it is a web page, website, or a web application, or whatever it is, instead of saying website, we'll say web app. So this is a group of pages. So the home page, there will be about page. Generally, there will be services page, what services company is providing. There will be a client page and contact. So think about it. So every page. So if you see, each page will have a different design, but every page commonly header will be there, footer will be there, and some places if you are keep going for the slide bar, think about this kind of design. This is home page design. Now here header is a reusable component that we're supposed to create. Footer also reusable component. Slider also you have to create reusable component. If you are not going for any framework architecture, so if you are using core technologies to build this kind of application, in home page also we have to repeat, we have to duplicate header, slide bar and footer. About us page also, the source code with respect to these three areas we should repeat in about page, services page, clients page and contact page. Now here we are violating the rule of dry principle. Dry. So this is very important. We should understand. Do not repeat yourself. You should not repeat any code. Either it may be HTML or it may be CSS or JavaScript or Angular. Any code we should not even repeat it. Why we should not even repeat? You guys please try to understand. Guys, if you are keep repeating the code, the size of a project is going to increase. As long as the size increases, the application performance decreases. If the application performance decreases, the end users are not going to show the interest to access your application. That's why, my dear friends, you please try to understand. Okay, so now what I'm trying to explain, if instead of using the core technologies, if you are keep going for advanced frameworks like Angular, the advantages are more. And Angular is a ready-made framework which has this many features. Each feature has significant importance, which will allow developer to implement the web-related features as quickly as possible. So you can write less code and you will be able to complete your task as quickly as possible. So the advantages of going for even frameworks, there will be some concepts called lazy loading. Using those lazy loading, you can even improve your application performance. This information is sufficient enough for you to understand why should we choose Angular. Then let me create one sample application, my dear friends. Guys, so to build a sample applications, you guys have to install Node.js. Node. Step number one, let me clear all. First, step number one, to create an Angular project. I'm creating Angular project. Step number one, first you have to check Node.js. This is a prerequisites. Node.js you must have to install. Next, once Node.js is installed, so npm is also part, Node Package Manager. You have to check Node Package Manager. It is by default installed with Node.js. This is Node Package Manager. This package manager will allow developer to download the respective packages which are really needed for our application to develop. And once Angular CLI, you should also, once this 2 is installed, Angular CLI version also you have to install. Angular CLI. CLI stands for command line interface. This is a kind of a tool which will allow developer to create a Angular based application. Command line interface. And you should also understand the very basics of Babel. You should understand what is Babel. You need not to install, but you should understand Babel. It is a tool. What generally Babel, what it is going to do, it will try to transpile a TypeScript code. Guys, listen carefully. End of the day, the browsers always understands JavaScript. The browsers, if you ask me, whatever the browser it is, all the browsers understands only JavaScript. It understands JavaScript. But while creating Angular project, we are going to write TypeScript code. TypeScript is also similar like JavaScript, but it has some sort of little bit different syntax. I'll try to explain when I'm creating an Angular project. Now, TypeScript is fully strict coupled language. Then what you must have to do, you must have to install the Angular CLI version. Then you should also have a basic knowledge about what is Babel. You need not to install any Babel, but you should also have a Babel. What is the use of Babel? You should also understand what is the use of Webpack behind the scenes. This is a package bundling tool. This is package bundling tool. Babel, it is a transpiler. It is going to transpile TS code into appropriate JavaScript code. Not only TS code, ES5, ES6 JavaScript code also it will convert into ES5. Why? Because it supports Angular. Browsers will always support ES5, ES6 still. So we must have to write ES5 code. But ES5 code, if you are planning to write it, so there are some cases the difficult syntaxes will be there. The people who are coming from a different programming background to understand this ES5 syntaxes, they'll face little difficulty. That is why ES6 is inspired by C#, Java, C and C++, so that anybody can easily understand ES6 syntaxes compared to ES5. That is where, but the browser still understands ES5, and to transpile or to convert ES6 into ES5 or to transpile TypeScript code into appropriate JavaScript, this Babel is the one which is using behind the scenes. Here we are talking about Angular. Angular JS is a older version. And see, let me, before creating a project, guys, many people are confused. Even the company HRs also, they are confused. Angular JS, this is a older version. Angular is a newer version. New version. So in Angular, right from the beginning, if you see 2.0 and 3.0, but 3.0, you need not worry. Why? Because they have not released officially. Directly they jumped back to 4.0. Then 5.0, 6.0, 7.0, 8.0, 9.0, 10.0, now 11.x and 0 at 12. I think 12 is under beta release, I guess. And we are also working on Angular project, but we are using 8 version. So the 12.0, so I think it is a beta release. Now I'm going to explain about whatever the latest version which is there. There is no much differences between a latest version and a old version, my dear friends. You please try to understand. So what is the differences between one version to another version also I'll explain in this particular session. Okay, this is all about the versions and who has built this Angular. And if you ask me, Angular initial version is released in the year 2000, closed around 11-12. Angular JS has released for building a single page applications. Since Angular JS has lot of difficulties for a developer to build an application. That is where Angular team, they released a completely, they restructured. It is not about enhancements. They completely changed the architecture of Angular and they renamed it as Angular 2. Now Angular 1 is a older version. Don't even worry about Angular 1, and Angular 2 and above versions only you must have to check. Okay, so now Angular 8, which is more prominent and which is being used by many companies, and the history, that is enough. Angular 12 is the latest unstable version. You should always go for a stable versions, my dear friends. Now here this Angular, let me create one sample project first, and I'll explain how are we going to create a sample project. As I already said, we must have to check whether proper Node.js is installed or not. And let me open a command prompt. So I'm just checking whether Node is installed in my computer. Node-v. Yes, Node version 14.8.0. Hope you can see my screen. Can you all see my screen? Next, so along with Node, npm will also be installed. npm-v. So npm version also, it is by default, it will install along with Node. Next, Angular CLI also you have to check my dear friends. ng-version. Let me go for, this is I'm checking whether all the prerequisites is installed or not. So here the command is ng version, not hyphen, just a version. Now here you will be able to see what version. See here, I don't want to upgrade my Angular version. Why? Because many applications which I have used in this computer, which are used by Angular 8. If I have upgrade unwanted problems that I am going to face. But I'll try to explain about Angular 8 only, but at last I'll give you the differences between 8 and the stable version, maybe 11. Okay, next my dear friends, you see here, I would like to decide where I wanted to create my sample project. Now to do so, maybe many people are familiar with command line interface. So let me go back to some particular drive where you are planning to create. Now cd/, it will go to the C drive and cd space desktop or documents. And dir, let me see, I think dir, list of all the list. I wanted to move back to the documents, or what I can do, so go back to my folder. Inside the documents, I created XLR. Within this XLR, let me create one more subfolder, Angular app. Within this Angular app, I must have to create my sample application. Guys, to do that, let me select complete address. I am using shortcut command to open a command prompt. So next, what I have to do, I must have to create a project. So to create a new project, so you have to, since you have already installed Angular CLI, those who have not installed Angular CLI, guys, for them, I'm just giving a command. You please try to use npm install. Either shortcut also you can use it. Install globally -g globally, which is a flag, Angular/CLI. This is a command you guys have to use to install Angular CLI. Why Angular CLI is required? Guys, to create Angular project, instead of creating manually, you should always use command line interface to create a project. That's why the command line interface tool You must have to install globally in your application, in your. So now all you need to do is kindly keep creating one sample application. So if you wanted to create a sample application, then since Angular CLI is already installed, I'm going to use ng. So ng new followed by here the project name you have to give. So let me create one project name and I'm going to give sample app. I'm just giving one name, sample app. So then the moment when you are executing this, which is going to prompt some questions, it will ask you to select whether, see, routing, which is asking, that CLI is asking automatically, do we need to create a router module? If you say yes, which will automatically create. If you show no, so which is not going to create, then again, if you guys wanted to, you have to create a manually. Okay, my dear friends, see here. Now I just wanted to use Angular routing. Routing says navigation between one page to another page. I just need routing. Also, you can also decide whether you wanna go with CSS style sheet or SCSS or SASS. These guys are the preprocessors of CSS. Since you people are not aware of SCSS and SASS, kindly select CSS as your style guide. I selected CSS. Next, which will automatically create an application. Now you guys have to wait until some time. So this Angular CLI is behind the scenes, it is creating a sample application for you. Sample application basic code structure. Now once this application, that is how the performance, guys, listen carefully. If you are using any of the framework, every framework, no matter whether you are using client or server, whatever it is, everywhere, every framework will have its own structure. You guys should also be familiar with the structure which is provided by a framework. Now I will also explain what is the structure which was given by this Angular version, and each one of the folder, also you should understand what is the use of each one of the folder which is there in our application, and you should also know where are we going to write a code. And see, Angular is fully structured and it is planned framework which can be used to build a single page architecture, and it can also be used to build mobile applications as well. And what is the structure, how are we going to build, this is what I would like to explain. Next, see, in Angular, out of all the features, component is one of the best feature. Okay, I'll first, what I'll do, listen carefully. Let this particular application is created now. Now you must have to move back to sample app. Now we are inside a sample app folder. Now try to ng serve s-o. I'm just using shortcut. Let me serve this application. Serve is nothing but we are going to compile this code and we are going to create a bundle, and we wanted to show the output of this application. That is where we are using ng serve-o, which is going to see behind the scenes what happened. This application is going to serve, and Webpack comes into a picture. So the Webpack is going to create a bundle behind the scenes. Now it is started compiling. The way how are we going to compile HTML, CSS, Bootstrap page is completely different than Angular bus. Everything you must have to handle by using a command. ng space yes stands for serve, -o is a flag. This -o flag, what it will do, it will try to open this application in a default browser whatever you set. So now my application is loading in a default browser. You see here, if you can see this particular page after serving your application, which means you people have already successfully installed your Angular. Now the URL says localhost:4200 localhost. Internally, the server is also created by Angular CLI, and :4200 is the default host of your Angular. The local server is also created by Angular CLI, and the port 4200 is assigned to a local host to run your Angular application. This is a sample page, my dear friends. If you can see this sample page, which means that all the installation properly created and your project is successfully created by Angular CLI. In case if any errors are there in your project creation, and you may not able to see this particular page. Okay, next, let us see. This is a sample page which was given by a framework, but I wanted to build one sample application. Guys, listen. In this application, I don't want to create HTML, CSS from the scratch. Let me download one sample, template from any of the website. Now you see here, let me go for ColorLib. This is one of the website, ColorLib. In this ColorLib, we do have a lot of templates. Now let me go for ColorLib e-commerce template. So there are many free and paid templates are there which are built by Bootstrap, and I just wanted to download any one of them, my dear friends. Now you see here, there are many. Out of all, let me go for any one of them. I don't want to waste my time. So let me go for any one of them and try to check whether it is a free one or paid one. So since it is a free one, I think, it is a paid one. So we don't want to go for any paid ones, guys. So let me download a free one. Free themes or free templates. So let me type free e-commerce templates. Understand the concept here, whatever the techniques which I am using. So if I wanted to write HTML from the scratch, it will try to take unwanted time because we don't have that much of time. Since we are good at HTML, CSS, JavaScript, let us keep downloading any of the template. This is WordPress template. I don't want this WordPress template. I must have to go for pure HTML, CSS if it is not working here. Now, which is also paid version. We don't want a free, we wanted to go for a free version. Let me search for a free version, guys. So instead of searching in ColorLib, or I can even go for e-commerce templates, Bootstrap, free download. Or download any one of them. So let me go for this vegetable one. Simple one is enough to understand. Live demo. Okay, fine. This is enough. So let me download this. Download. So in this session, so what I'm doing, I'm working on this HTML and CSS I am downloading from internet. I am converting this HTML into Angular. How Angular is helping us to convert a static HTML into a dynamic, and also how are we going to categorize and organize your folder structure according to a framework. That is what you must have to understand first. Okay, guys, in general, when you people are working on any real-time application, no matter whether you are building Angular, first HTML and CSS we have to make it first, then we must have to keep moving for JavaScript. Sorry, Angular conversion. Now here, let me extract this application. First, we'll try to see how this application is created. Downloads and extract this application into your extract. Now see here, so he has created his own like CSS, icons, images, JavaScript and index. Now, if you ask me, index, let me open this index. It is created by using plain HTML, and I wanted to check what sort of logics that he has used, what are the tools, whether he has used Bootstrap or not. I am going to check in their source. Now in JavaScript, I think Bootstrap bundle he has used, Bootstrap 4 and custom.js he has created, and he also used jQuery version. He also used some plugins. That's okay. Now how are we going to convert this static page into a dynamic application? So we'll try to understand this. This is a single page, guys, but we wanted to convert this into multiple pages. That story I'll try to do it a little later. Now this static application, how are we going to convert into Angular, and what sort of measures that we have to take? So you please try to understand first. Now to open our Angular application, which is just now created, and go back to your code where you have created your application, Angular app, and this sample application that you have to open in editor. Why? Because editor which will allow us to write a code. Now to open this application, what I'm going to do, I'll use Visual Studio Code. So earlier to write HTML, CSS, JavaScript related projects, I have used Sublime Text. For this single page application architecture, I may have to go for Visual Studio Code. I am opening Visual Studio Code by using a command, code space dot. Now what happens? My sample app, this is going to load in my Visual Studio, or else you can also open, you can go to a Visual Studio and open a folder. So like that also you can open your project, or you can go to the command line and you can run a command called code space dot. So for that you may have to install packages in your command prompt. Then only that code statement is going to work, or else it will not even work. So next, my dear friends, let me see here. If you look after my project structure, now E2E, one folder is there, node models, another folder is there, and SRC, 3 folders are there, and there are some files which are also there. Guys, let me explain about each one of the file and what is the use of each folder and where are we going to write application related logic. It is very, very important, my dear friends. Now here, E2E, it is end-to-end testing related files will be there in this particular E2E. So this E2E, it is not our business, because the testers, those who are testing this kind of applications, the testers are going to write all the scripts with respect to test cases. They are going to use this E2E folder. And node modules folder, all the node modules which are there, all the modules, you can even see that node modules in this particular folder. You need not to worry about what is the modules, what is the use of each modules. You need not to worry about it. See, Angular may need some modules while creating application. All the modules would have been downloaded from internet and it is stored inside node modules folder. Now tomorrow, if you need any other packages, You should also download from internet and you have to store it inside a node module. From there you have to reference the files in order to use them. Next, my dear friends, SRC. This is where we have to write all the application code. Source, SRC folder. I'll try to explain about SRC folder a little later. Next, editor config. This is something related to your editor. If you are using Visual Studio Code, that Visual Studio Code related configurations. And one more thing here, you guys need not to worry about all these files. And you have to keep writing a code inside an app folder, and you have to create your own components. I'll try to explain about where are we going to write a code. Next, you see here editor is editor config. It is configuration related to your editor. Git ignore. So this is related to your source control. You don't need to pass this dist folder temporary. This all the git ignore file. Guys, when you are working on real time, you may have to push the code from local server to your application server. If you are planning to push your code from local server to your application server, sometimes you don't need to pass some of the modules. Node modules you don't need to keep uploading from a local to server. What happens if you are keep pushing node modules from your local to server? Then it will try to consume a lot of bandwidth. It will kill your network. That's why, to avoid this unwanted problems while pushing the code from local to a server, and we should also inform your Git to ignore some sort of files for uploading. That is where git ignore file, you have to create .git ignore, where whatever the folders or files which you don't want to push from local, you can even list all the folders and files. Then you see here, if you see, there are few files and folders that we have listed in git ignore. The moment when you are pushing the code from local, these folders are ignored. That is also, don't worry too much at this stage. Next, angular.json. Guys, this is where your application related configurations, all configurations which is already been created by your Angular CLI. In this particular file, in case if you are planning to add external JavaScript or external CSS, you must have to go back to angular.json file. In that angular.json file, you see here your project, whatever the name that you have created, sample project. So now you see here, this is a JSON string where you can see left hand side keys and right hand side values. These are related to your Angular application configurations. Under the project folder, sample app, if you come back, there is a styles, there is a scripts, and you will also get styles and scripts even somewhere under test also. This is for completely testing. Don't even modify over here, and you have to add external JavaScript and external CSS files under your projects, whatever the name of your project. Sample app is your project in this example. Under sample app JSON string, you can see this styles. Under this styles, it is array. You can, if you are planning to create multiple CSS files, if you are planning to load those multiple CSS, you must have to configure all the CSS into style.css file. Sorry, in this particular styles, you have to pass as a value. Same way, in case tomorrow if you are planning to use any JavaScript files, then make sure that all the JavaScript code that you have to, that file path, the file names and file path, you have to pass it as a value to your array. I'll tell you when we are working on a project, I'll tell you what sort of CSS file that you have to load it here. And maybe if you guys are familiar with HTML and CSS, the external CSS, if you wanted to load it, we have to use a link tag. But here in Angular, you don't need to use a link tag, and you don't need to see here the folder structure is different than a normal application. So if you open a normal application in an editor, since we have downloaded one normal application, let me open that normal application, my dear friends. open a folder which we have just downloaded. Go back to the downloads. This file. Now, if you open index.html, guys, listen carefully. In this index.html, we have linked even the favicon.png or bootstrap file or style.css or responsive css, whatever it is required, all the files we have linked inside index.html. But when it comes to Angular, you don't need to link all this file inside the index.html. And we should also find out in our project, did you find any of the index.html in the root directory of your project? No. That index.html will be there inside src. Here index.html is there. In this index.html, which is there inside src folder, you need not to link any external css or external javascript. If you are planning to load external css or external javascript in Angular based application, kindly open angular.json file, and there is an option for you to add external css under style property, and there is an option for you to add external javascript under script property. This is how you have to set the configurations. Next, guys, every application server or every application package, you guys have to create a file in the name of index. The index is nothing but the initial file, which is a single point of contact. If you are coming back to a single page application architecture, this index.html page will act as a SPOC, SPOC, single page, single point of contact. The moment when you serve, this index.html file will load. Inside index.html, you can also find in the line number 11, one app-root. This is a parent component which is been created by Angular CLI during the application creation. Now this is root component. I can say it is a app-root. It is a root component which also called as parent component. This parent component by default, which was created by Angular CLI during the project creation. Now Angular application, everything is a component. Everything, even if you wanted to create a small HTML, better to put it as a component. That is where you have to decompose your page into multiple components. Now components are a building block of an application. Guys, listen carefully. What is component? Component is a building block of an application. Now Angular CLI, initially it has created one component, that is app component, which resides inside src folder. Inside src app, you can see that folder called app. Inside app, you can find out few files. This module, routing module, forget about this router module for time being. Then remaining .css, .html, .spec.ts and .ts. These 4 files are component related files. Every component will have CSS file, HTML file, spec.ts file and ts file. Now I'll try to explain about it, and every Angular application will also have one main module, at least one module, that is app module. It can also have multiple other modules as well. Now during the creation of a project, that Angular CLI is generating one root component, which will also generate one routing module, which will also generate one main module, that is app module. So this is where all the configurations are helping. Okay, so next, you please try to understand, guys. The moment when you are serving an application, it will come back to index.html, and in index.html, it is going to call a app component. Now it will go back to the app, and the app component HTML. You see here, all the HTML, whatever we have written here, that HTML only it is printing. Now you see here, this is a static page, sample page, which was created by Angular. Now I don't want this sample page. Now let me delete. Guys, listen carefully. If you go back to your so let me see what I'm trying to see. For example, here This is my sample application. In this sample application, you can even find out this is a sample HTML. I don't want this sample page. I wanted to create my page like this, something like this. Or, sir, this layout, I don't like this. Okay, let me go for another good layout, which is looks more, even more beautiful. Let me check this. I'll demo. I'm searching for a good layout, my dear friends. Just stay back with me. Now let me download one sample application. Oh my god. Okay, it's okay. Let me use the same application which I have downloaded. It's fine. Now understand the concept. No matter whatever the layout that we are building, kindly understand the concepts now. So I am deleting all my code which is there in app component.html. I deleted it. So the moment when you delete, you see here automatically the page is reloaded and you can see that empty page. Now whatever you type here, h1, welcome to Angular. You type something which is going to print here. Now this sample page which was given by Angular, I wanted to delete it. I would like to create my own page from the scratch. Since I had already created one layout, guys listen carefully. This page I wanted to generate by using Angular. Now I have a version, HTML version is already there with me. How I am going to decompose this particular page into a multiple components, first you please try to understand. You must have to plan. Now if you look after this example, now if you are using HTML, every code in HTML, every code the people are writing in the same page. All the code, even header, footer, every code is already there. You can see that every code, the size of this particular file, if you see 522 lines are there. All the code is there within the single page. But when you are coming back to Angular, you have to create each and every portion into your multiple components, and you have to divide your page into multiple components. How are you going to divide this page into multiple components? You please try to see. I am decomposing this page. Now this whole area, if you ask me, this whole area, I am going to divide this as one component. This is my header component. Next, once that header component is done, now this is called a slider. So for that, this is component header. I'll create this one as header component. Now this component, I'll create it as slider component. Now this one, since it is about that particular company, I'll also create this one as about component. And this is one more section, fresh vegetable section. This will also create by using one more component. And testimonials, I'll create one component. And contact us, I'll create another component. At last, the footer, I'm going to create one more component. This is how I can even divide my page into multiple components. What is the benefits of dividing my page into multiple components is, first of all, it reduces the complexity. Then it improves the readability, and modularity it is going to increase. Then how I am going to convert this, you please try to understand, my dear friends. If you come back, now before dividing your page into multiple components, and you should also check the page is depending on multiple CSS and multiple JavaScript files. Now all the CSS and all the JavaScript files that you have to load into your project, then only you will be able to use them for building your application. If you are not loading all the prerequisites, what happens, if you are just writing HTML alone, you can't even display the design properly. So that's why Bootstrap, style.css, response.css, every file which is there in that static page, we have to copy all the CSS. See this much of CSS that they have used. I don't want to explain about each one of the CSS. That story is different. First, let me copy the CSS files and some of the icons that they have used. This icon also I wanted to use it. Some sort of images which they have used. All the images also we must have to use it. And some sort of JS files. Everything that you have to copy, sir. Guys, listen carefully. From your static file. Now if you come back, just give me 1 minute. Now go back to your static template which you have downloaded. I'm going back to my static template and I am copying all the CSS files and also icons and images. And JavaScript files. Guys, listen carefully. All these folders that I'm copying, and go back to my project which I have started creating this Angular, which is there inside documents, XLR and Angular app. Inside app folder, guys, listen. So here SRC, there will be assets folder. You have to keep all your external resources into assets folder. You have to create all external files into assets folder. This is very important, my dear friends. Next, from here you have to keep giving the references. Now we must have to load all the CSS files and JavaScript files first. Now to do so, what I'm going to explain, you see here, what are the CSS? Bootstrap, style, responsive, and custom scroll bar, and font awesome CSS, and fancy box CSS. All these guys, they are loading. Now guys, listen carefully. I should also load these Bootstrap files and every CSS file into my Angular project. To load them, as I already said, if you wanted to load external JavaScript, make sure that you must have to go for external CSS and external CSS if you wanted to load. Outside of SRC, there is a file called angular.json. In this angular.json, so under the style, you have to give all the files. Now, you see here, guys, your files will be there inside SRC folder, assets, CSS, here bootstrap min.css and responsive CSS and style.css, everything. Now you see here I am also setting the path. src is a folder. Inside src, assets is a folder. Inside assets, css is one more subfolder. Under that, bootstrap, see this file name, you have to type bootstrap dot min dot css. Similarly, you should also load comma, you should also load other css files, and since so copy paste 2 3 4 files that we are loading. Now here the order is also important. That order you have to collect it from a static page. Now bootstrap is loaded, style.css. Now css, second file style.css, and third file is responsive.css. Next, fourth file is jQuery custom scrollbar.css. Next, fourth and fifth files you see, guys, this is not been loaded with a absolute path. Those guys have loaded, directly, loading from a CDN server. This is absolute path. Whereas coming to other files, they have loaded relative path. Now this, whatever the 4 files that they have loaded absolute path, now you can also link them in your index.html. That is fine. So try to let me link these 2 files in my index.html. So inside src you can see that there is a file index.html. Now here I will try to link them because those guys are loaded through CDN network. Font Awesome is one of the library. If you would like to use any of the icons when you are developing an application, all the icons can be referred from Font Awesome. And this Fancy Box is one of the library, jQuery library. So if you wanted to display some information in a pop-up, in a fancy pop-up, that is where this library that they have used it. And those 2 libraries I started loading into my index.html file as a CDN link. Either you can even load here, or the best way is even this Font Awesome 4.0.3 also you have to download, and you have to keep it inside node modules. From there you have to give a configurations inside angular.json, but that takes some time. That's why I loaded them directly into my index.html. This is not a right approach when you are working on a real-time applications. Let me save all this. Now I loaded all respective CSS files, my dear friends. Next, just give me 1 minute. Now what we're supposed to do, you see here you have to divide your page into multiple partitions, multiple blocks. Now whatever the layout that we have downloaded, that layout has all the code. Now when we are converting that HTML bootstrap layout into Angular, now you guys have to completely decompose your page into multiple components. Now when you are decomposing, you should also know how are you going to decompose into multiple components. Now for that header portion, all the header code you see here, whatever the code which is related to header, that code I have to put it inside one folder. Now what I am doing, I am just copying my header code. Guys, listen carefully. I am header top. Now my header code I'm copying. So or else first let me see 1 minute, guys. Let me copy the complete code. I'll copy the complete code. The static HTML. I'm just moving into my the whole page code. Let me copy. I'm copying this code. So I'm going back to my Angular application. In this Angular application, the initial component is app component. Inside app component.html, instead of writing this, I'm just pasting all. Next, this JavaScript also we have to load. So to load this JavaScript files, guys, listen carefully. We must have to go back to angular.json. Here all the scripts that you have to load. Now you see here the script files. Same inside src folder, /assets is a subfolder, /javascript. Inside a JavaScript, we have a file called jQuery. jQuery file also there. This to create that application, they have dependent on this many plugins first. This can libraries and plugins they have used it. Similarly, you should also load other libraries, comma. So if you guys are good at fundamentals, it is easy for you to understand. Or else, if those who are not good at fundamentals, so it will be difficult for you people to follow me. Those who have completely joined today, so people would have been get confused about it. That's why please try to go back my previous sessions as well, so that it will be easier for you to understand. So this, I am just loading all the prerequisites. That's all I'm doing. I'm not loading any extra files. If you go back in my HTML, pop-up min.js also I have to load. Popper file. Next, Bootstrap bundle. And the layout which we have downloaded, they have loaded jQuery 2 times, but we don't want this jQuery to be loaded 2 times. And this plugin.js file is also required. And jQuery custom, these are the libraries. You need not to worry about all these libraries, my dear friends. When you are working on a project, we'll also get to know what is the use of each one of them. Now, since I downloaded a third-party template, according to the template only, I'm just using it. Excuse me. JS/custom.js. Next slash, again, however the files that they have loaded, we must have to load the same sort of files. /javascript. Then custom is over. Next, what is the file? This jQuery fancy box. This jQuery fancy box also they directly loaded through CDN. I must have to copy this jQuery fancy box CDN. That CDN link I'm going to load it into my index.html. The scripts always we have to load before closing of a body. So if you guys are making changes in any configuration files, you please try to you have to recompile your application. To recompile your application, guys, listen carefully. Here I'm just stopping it, Control C. Again, I'm just serving application. If you are not making a changes in configuration files, you need not to recompile again. So if you do any changes inside SRC folder, automatically behind the scenes your application recompiles. In case if you do changes outside of SRC folder, then you have to manually recompile it. Now let it recompile again. I think we have loaded all the prerequisites, guys. Next, go back and try to check whether it is compilation process is done or not. Yes. Now you see here there is lot of errors are there. Illegal operation on directory. And we must have to carefully observe what is the error. Illegal operation on directory, read an object dot read sync. So let me stop it and recompile again. And the error which is nowhere, it is not giving the error which is related to the files what we modified, which is giving some error within our framework. That is where I stopped it, I recompiled again. Sometimes these kind of problems also will come us. If you make some changes, because of those changes or those dependencies are not loading in the sense, your framework is corrupted. If the framework is corrupted during the building process, it will start giving errors. Now we are expecting that application to load like this, but it is giving an error. Go back to the console of your command prompt and see here there is an issue with the path. There is an issue with your image path. Let me check what is the issue. You guys have to read errors properly, my dear friends, because even if it is giving a bigger errors also, don't worry about it. All these guys are very small minor mistakes. Now you see here the images, since the image whatever we are using, one of the plugin what we downloaded, that plugin images path is wrong. That is where it is giving a error. So how are we going to fix this error? Now inside the assets, CSS, now UI widgets, I think in order to display some of the icons we have used it, they have used UI widgets. In that there is a path issues with respect to images. Cannot resolve images / UI icon 44. Okay, now either you have to fix these issues, because here the path issues that we have to check bus. Now So I think we have used some template which has some issues already. Now what I am planning to do is I'll try to go back to my own template which I have created earlier, guys. Guys, let me do one thing. I'm going to create one more instance because in the beginning of a days, I think we created one project, an XLR project that we created, right? If you go back inside XLR and index.html, if you right click and open this one in a browser, this one of the application that we have built. Let us keep converting that same application by using React. That is best, by using Angular. That is best, my dear friends. So why? Because the layout which we have downloaded, it also has some internal issues. In order to fix them, the time is not sufficient enough for us to fix them. That is why I am going to work on my same page what I have built. To do so, again, I'm just creating one more sample project. And please try to understand. Let me go for one more instance. cd dot dot. Inside Angular app, instead of using a sample app, I'm going to create ng new XLR app. I'm just creating XLR app. So, which will also generate one more project from the scratch. So I think I have selected a wrong template today. It is asking for us to create a routing file. Yes. Let me select CSS. We will attempt to create one more project, my dear friends. Now we'll work on a new project because existing project, the template which I have taken, which has unwanted errors, and if I can also fix those errors, but it is time waste. If I keep fixing those errors, I can't even complete the specific concepts. That is where let me go for one sample layout which I have created. The page which I have created, I would like to convert that into a Angular template. Angular is dead easy, guys, but if you know the concepts, if you have at least one project experience by using HTML, CSS, Angular will become very easy. If you don't have any experience in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Bootstrap, Angular will become tough. So let us wait for some more time. This application is building for us. Angular CLI is creating application behind the scenes. Okay, now let me run this new application, my dear friends. cd space XLR app. Same story, we are running this XLR app. Now ng serve -o bus. Here one application we have already been loaded using 4200 port. Now again, if you are running one more application, Angular CLI is going to look for 4200. Since the 4200 is already blocked by another application, it will start start compiling it. So to avoid this, ng serve -o port, and we have to give some other port 4300. Now what happens if your one application is loading? Now here what I see, I'm not creating, we don't need to create every time a new application. The template what I have chosen to convert as an Angular, the template has some issues. To avoid again, to resolve those issues, it will try to take too much of time. Instead of using someone else's template, the template which I have already created in the beginning of this session, I'm planning to use those templates so that my template does not contain any errors. I would like to use that template to convert my Angular application. That is where I created a one more, app, Mr. Raman. So we don't need to create a application every time. One application. So far, I'm in the beginning of application creation. Once my application is created, you all will get some idea bus. Wait for some time until we come to the main road. We are still in a smaller roads where we are facing couple of hiccups. That hiccups has to complete. Now again, same folder structure, my dear friends. Now let me see what I'm going to explain here. The new application which I have created, XLR app. Open this also in a editor, one more editor. Space dot. Now see my XLR app which has index.html. In that index.html, you see I haven't used much third-party libraries. I have used only my custom CSS and I haven't used any of the JavaScript. Now this looks simple and neat. Let me use that particular simple and neat file. Then I'll come back to your conversion of the static HTML into my Angular application. Guys, listen. Now I don't want the previous application, so let me open my new application. Inside this, I will first let me create and keep watching whatever I'm doing. Once if I finish that template conversion, then I'll explain about each and every folder structure. Now I'm going back to my app. In that app.html, let me delete all the empty code which is given by Angular team, and I am copy pasting my template code. I copy pasted. Once I copy paste, you see that 4300. So it is reloading. Now you see that this is how your page is going to look like. Why? Because the CSS we haven't loaded properly. Now all the CSS, guys, either you can also create a component specific CSS or you can also create a global specific CSS. But in real time, we should always divide every component. CSS we have to keep it in one component, and global CSS we have to keep it inside a global CSS. Now you see here, this is a global CSS file wherein my static page CSS, which is there inside CSS folder. Let me copy all the code. I'll try to keep it inside my global CSS file. I'll keep it inside my global CSS. Then, since the CSS is added, see how quickly your static HTML is converted into Angular application. This is Angular application, but we have to decompose your application into multiple bits and pieces, which is called as components. Now, how are we going to decompose it? Let me explain that. So far we haven't created any component, my dear friends. And how are we going to create a component? I'll try to explain. Now I don't want my header to be fixed one because it looks ugly. I'll try to comment out. Okay, fine. Now let me give us some background for my header. Background color. I'm going to use some light background. And the text on this, gray background, I think, the gold color text is not looking so great. I wanted to make these guys a white color. Also, this background highlighter, which is not required for color orange, background color red. Now LIF first shell so this is not required. So I'm just beautifying my page. Yes. Now that's fine. Guys, listen carefully. So far, I haven't used any concepts of component. Now, I have to separate my header component. I should also create separate slider component. For left sidebar, separate component. For right sidebar, separate component. Like that, one single page, I would like to decompose into multiple components. How I am going to do, you please try to see. I am going back to command line. So now Angular by default it is giving one component which is app component. Now I wanted to create one more component for header separate. To do that, what I'm going to do, I will use a command prompt within my application. Ng is a command line tool, Angular CLI. Generate, G for generate, C for component. I'm using shortcuts, Ng, G for generate, C for component, space, GC component name. I'm creating header component. The moment when I generate this, if I execute this command, go back to your folder, inside an app, you will be able to see that header folder, guys. Wait for some time until that particular command gets executed. You can see that there is a folder which is created now, header. Under header, you can see that header related CSS, header related component HTML, spec.ts and ts. These 4 files automatically created, and now all the HTML with respect to your header, this HTML code with respect to your header, you must have to copy from home app.html and copy this header code. This whole header code, Control X, I'm keeping into my header component, decomposing. Now here, listen carefully. In the place of this particular HTML, since that HTML is already moved to my header component, I'm using header component. I'm loading that header component. Now, how can I load this component into another component? You see here, every component will have selector name. That is component. Component, if you wanted to reuse it in multiple places, component selector only you have to use app-header, guys. It is not header component. The name which is given as app header. Now, same way, slider. For slider also, you must have to create one more component. Now see, Control X. Let me go for a command line, and again I'm creating one more component called slider. Once the slider component is created, You can even see inside app folder, slider component is also generated. Go back to HTML, copy paste your slider component HTML which you have collected. So if the slider component, if you wanted to reuse it, and go back to slider component, and wherever this selector value app-slider, go back and use it inside your app component, guys, as a tag, app-slider. Similarly, one main container that you have to create. This is main container. For that also I am creating one more component, Control X. And go back to a command prompt and create one main container. I'm giving some name. Inside this main container, I wanted to load left sidebar, right sidebar, and middle bar. So to do that, under main container, go back, try to copy paste whatever the code that this is what I'm decomposing. Now I wanted to use this inside, I think, app icon. So instead of using own name, go back to a main container .ts file, app-main container. This is how they have created, and use the same name. Next, footer. Now we have to copy, Control X. So create one more component in the name of footer. See, when you are building an application, see in Angular, every time we're supposed to use a command prompt to create a component, or we can also use a command line terminal inside your editor as well. So because the way of building application through Angular, it is dead easy, guys. If you know the process, because 50 to 60% of the code which will be automatically generated by a command line interface. Now the footer component, if you go to footer, all the footer code that you have to write it inside app. Now let me go back to my app component. I should also load my footer component here. App-footer. Now that is how, if you can see here, I decomposed my page into multiple components: header, sidebar, main container. Again, this main container can also be divided into 3 more sub components. I will try to do it. And footer component. Now go back and reload. See, your application is still displays properly. There is no change, but in the code level, we have decomposed into multiple components. Now, what is the purpose of decomposing and why we supposed to decompose is, guys, instead of searching for example, if all the HTML which is there in one file, if the size is 500 or 1000 lines, and dealing 1000 lines individually is toughest than dealing 100 or 200 lines. Even the 1000 lines of code, if you are decomposing into 5 components, each component, if you are using 200 lines, and 200 lines is very simple and it is easy, whereas coming to 500 lines. That is why, so we are dividing your components. See, each page we are dividing into multiple components. And tomorrow when you are planning to build one more page, and for that one more page also you may need header component, you may also need slider component, you may also need footer components. In that case, instead of creating .html again and again, you can even reuse those components. That concept I'll try to explain tomorrow. Guys, today, if you get a time, so over a weekend, I think tomorrow and day after tomorrow, we don't have a session. So since we don't have a session, you guys please try to understand how are we going to create an application, and what is the use of each one of the folder, and how to create a components, and everything you please try to understand. And also go to my video, and I have explained many things, how to Now, because HTML and CSS, if I will be keep writing from the scratch, and this session I can't even complete it within the time. That's why the HTML template which I have already created, the same template I am converting that into a Angular project. Even in real time also, first we'll try to build a static pages. Then those static pages will try to convert them into components. Those components will try to make them dynamic by using Ajax and all this stuff in Angular. Okay. So next, this is what we have decomposed. Now, if you go back to your SRC folder, now earlier only one component was there, that is a root component, which is called as app component. Next, I created footer component, header component, main component. Now, all these components since I have created, just give me 1 minute and put a charger. Now, open app module.ts. This is a module. See, generally in Angular, module is called a group of files which we are creating. We are keep adding them into a one module. If we are adding all the files into a single module, during the compilation process, that Webpack is going to collect the files from a module and it will start compiling your application behind the scenes. Now, every Angular application, the mandatory one module is mandatory. According to your project requirements, you can also create a multiple components and multiple modules, but one module is mandatory. Now, app.module.ts, which is created by Angular CLI during the project creation. Now, what does this particular app module do? It is going to collect all the components and whatever the other modules that we have built for your application. Everyone are going to register under this app module. Since it is a root module, we must have to register each and every module or every component and every routing module. Whatever you create with respect to your application, you have to make an entry inside your app module. Guys, listen carefully. Now here, line number 1 to line number 10, we have used a concept called import. Those who are familiar with C, in C, however, we are using #include stdio.h, #include content.io.h. This is where we are importing the header files. Similarly, we can also import whatever. See, few modules, the platform browser module is required in order to make any request using browser. If you wanted to make, then this platform browser is required, and Angular core and ng module is also required to bundle your whole project code into a single module. Now, this ng module is a class file which we have imported from Angular core, that is there inside a node module folder. Next, app routing module is for routing, and app component is a root component, header component, which I have created for header, slider, main container, footer. You see here, few of them which we imported from Angular and few of them which we have created for our application. Next, once we imported all these classes, guys, listen carefully. Under ng module, there are 4 keys are there. Very, very, very important to understand what are the different keys which are there in ng module. What is the use of each one of them? That is very important. Now, declaration is also one of the key. Imports is another key. Providers is another key. Bootstrap is also another key. Guys, declarations. All your components, see components which are related to your applications which you have created. All of them that you must have to make an entry under declaration key. Whereas coming to imports are nothing but, see, the browser module and app routing module which is created by Angular CLI, which are required to create your application, so that those to whom you are depending to create our application components, those dependent modules that you have to load inside a imports. Now the project specific modules that you have to put it inside a declarations. Again, I am repeating, to whom you have to put it inside a declaration, to whom you have to put it inside imports. You please try to understand. Imports, the one which we are using to build our components which are related to our application. Those dependent module we have to load it inside imports, and under declarations you have to load the components which are related to your application. Then providers, tomorrow if you guys are using any services to place request from client side to a server, those services comes under providers. That is why service providers. Next, whereas coming to Bootstrap, guys, this Bootstrap, don't even get confused about whatever the Twitter Bootstrap, which is a responsive web framework. Don't even worry about it. And that Bootstrap, this Bootstrap is a property, and by using this, whatever the component that you are passing as a value to this Bootstrap key, now this app component will act as an initial component the moment when you are executing your application. Now tomorrow, if you don't want to load app component, guys, listen carefully. If I try to load head component as my default component, you see here, you should not even make this change, but for you guys to understand, I'm just making my initial component as head component. If you see this, the moment when your application loads, you see here it is not even loading, there is error. Why? Because you have violated the rule, because the default component and bootstrapping component is always app component only. That's why if you go and check in a console, unwanted errors that you can even experience. Why? Because app header did not match any elements. Now to avoid this kind of issues, always you have to load the initial component when you are bootstrapping your application. You should always refer app component as your initial component. That is how all the configurations with respect to your whole application, you have to make an entry inside app.module.ts. This is a global file. Now I decomposed it, and also my dear friends, if I wanted to create about us page, now I'll create one more about.html. Now it won't even work. Why? Because about.html, even if you are loading that about.html, Angular will return to the home page. Why? Because you are not writing a code with respect to Angular syntax and Angular strategies. You are just still following the static application which we have built. Now, next class I will try to explain about the routing, and I will also explain how are we going to create a multiple pages, how are we going to navigate between one page to another page, and all these concepts will be taken care in the next class. Now in this class, today's session, I explained about what is the basics of Angular and what are the main features of Angular, how are we going to decompose your page into multiple components, and what is the folder structure. Somehow I explained about few folder structures, and that is all about, that's all for today. I don't want to overload today. One mistake which I picked up is I selected a wrong template. That wrong template has couple of errors. That is where when I am converting that HTML bootstrap template into Angular, I faced couple of issues. To avoid them, I have used my own template which was not having any errors. That's why, guys, if you are getting these kind of errors, you have to take a decision as quickly as possible. Even if you choose a wrong template, and we have to spend unwanted hours to resolve the errors. That's why first HTML CSS you must have to build first, then you must have to convert that particular page into Angular by going for a component concepts. Now tomorrow again I'll be keep creating multiple components. I'll also use many concepts which are there in Angular step by step. By next week we will be in a position to wind up Angular. Now I'm giving a task for all of you guys over this weekend. So go back to Angular official website, understand the folder structure, understand this what is modules, and how are you going to create a components, and what is command line interface. Why do we use CLI command line always to create a modules or to create a components, and can't we create manually? All these questions, whatever you get, you please try to research on internet and come back, and definitely I'm going to give you answers for all the questions on Monday. Some sort of preparation is also required, my dear friends. If you blindly come and join the session without having a basic knowledge, then you will get a lot of confusions. That's why, to avoid unwanted confusions, try to go for basics and come back. So that's all about today's session, and you please ask any questions, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address all the questions. Else we'll try to wind up the session. Hi guys, hope you people are having. If you have any questions, feel free to ask now. See, we'll provide the source code. Okay, so once we complete the project, we'll give you a source code. We'll put it in OneDrive. Wait for some time. Why? Because if you are giving under construction code, if any errors are there, again it will be a problem for all of you. Sir, I am using WebStorm editor. Is this okay, sir? Yes, that is up to you. If you are comfortable with WebStorm, go ahead. And generally, this Visual Studio Code has a lot of intelligence, and it has some set of predefined plugins. Those guys are going to allow us to use. So when you are making a mistakes, it will try to give some hint. That's why Visual Studio Code is a recommended editor, IDE, for building single page architecture. So we can provide this code, sir. And if you want notes also, so you can reach out to XLR. We'll try to provide notes or sample books or code. So you guys kindly reach out to admin of XLR, and we'll provide all the details. Guys, Visual Studio, don't even see, there is a Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio. Visual Studio is a heavy editor. That is for .NET people. If those who wanted to build an application using .NET or ASP.NET, that Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio people will use. Now, here Visual Studio VS Code, Visual Studio Code only we're supposed to use. That is a lightweight IDE. Don't work on Visual Studio Code because Visual Studio is a bigger IDE, which is not needed for front-end developer to use it. For a front-end, especially for single-page applications, either Angular or React, you can go for VS Code, Visual Studio Code. It is a lightweight. Since your system is, it is struck because you are using heavy editor, which is not recommended. So see, do we use XUS? We are, instead of using XUS, we are going to use XUTP module. Similar module, we can use it. See, NG means Angular CLI. It is a short form of Angular, NG. And C in the sense component, G means generator. Similarly, NG means Angular. So I have used a command called ng space G for generator. I mean to say I am requesting Angular CLI to create a component whose name is slider. That is what is all about NGGC slider. So do you have any TypeScript basic class? No, we haven't conducted any TypeScript basic class, but as and when once that requirement, see, when we are building Angular application, I'm going to explain about TypeScript as well parallel. See, yes, arrangement of a component is also matters a lot, right? Because if you want to load header first, load header component first. If you are shuffling the component, if you are rearranging first footer and header, then however the order that you have placed, the same order it is going to display. That's why when you are working on real-time applications, the placement of an element and arranging the files, that also matters a lot. Is there any other questions? Guys, a good student should always ask questions. Now only few people are actively participating and they are asking questions. Few other people, I think, please kindly ask questions. If you really don't understand anything, feel free to ask questions. Thank you, Anil. Thank you so much. You also take care. What is the direction of data flow in Angular? Is it a bidirectional or unidirectional? So it is bidirectional. So I will also explain how bidirectional will work. That is two-way data binding. That can be achieved by using ng model directive. So it is very important concept. I will try to explain about it. Yes, sure. Next class, I'm sure I'm going to explain about a folder structure, Anil. So today, since with the very first introduction class, you people, if you have any confusions, moving forward, all the confusions are going to clear. So the assignment for all of you guys is kindly prepare, one sample website where the website should have 5 pages, and create, 5 pages website sample. Either it may be your college website. Just give me 1 minute. Hello. క్లాస్ లో ఉన్నాము 10 నిమిషాలు 5 నిమిషాలు అయిపోతుంది క్లాస్. నేను మళ్ళా చేస్తాను. Okay, next. What is the difference between Bootstrap and Angular? Only we divided whole application in multiple columns. See, Bootstrap is for responsive web design. Bootstrap, by using Bootstrap, you can make your web page responsive for different gadgets which are available in the market. Whereas coming to Angular, it is a JavaScript framework. See, mobile responsive framework is different, JavaScript framework is different. Guys, listen. When you are working on any bigger application, your JavaScript code should also be organized in a proper way. At the same time, you should also build your application pages that should be compatible for all available gadgets in the market. Yes, boss, it is curfew time. I totally forgot. I'm in office. I think, today I have a festival, police festival. Chalo, another 3 minutes to go. I'll finish it up soon. And Bootstrap and Angular, those guys are completely a different, MVC follows, Angular follows MVC structure. Literally, MVC follows component structure, but each component follows MVC architecture behind the scenes. So Angular material is similar like Bootstrap. So if you wanted to make your web page responsive, either you can go for Bootstrap to make it responsive, or you can also use Angular material. Okay. So I think that's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for your participation. Take care.